Hey everyone, it's Kirk here again at Option Alpha. So in this video, we're going to talk all things Iron Butterfly Strategy 101. We're going to go through Iron Butterfly setups, profit zones, risks, how you can start to use automation for Iron Butterflies, and go through a real trade example. So first of all, let's go through the setup of an Iron Butterfly. So Iron Butterflies are actually very easy to set up. It's essentially two vertical spreads that you're going to put together. So the payoff diagram looks like this. We'll come back to this here in a second, but this is the payoff diagram you're going to put together, and you're going to essentially create an Iron Butterfly by putting together two vertical spreads. You're going to sell a bull put spread and a call spread, and you're going to do both of those at the money for the short strike. So that's the main difference for an Iron Butterfly, is that it's exactly the same setup structurally as an Iron Condor, except Iron Butterflies have the exact same short strike that creates that kind of peak or triangle or point to the payoff diagram that you see when you build it inside of your Option Alpha account. You see that peak there, that's because you're selling the exact same short strike. Now, I always say that Iron Butterflies are a neutral strategy, but they are kind of an aggressively neutral strategy. And what I mean by that is that you're really trying to pin the stock around a price, typically around that price that you're selling those short strikes at. That's usually at the money. That's right where the stock is trading, but it can be a little bit out of the money on either end. You can kind of tilt or lean those Iron Butterflies a little bit, but it is an aggressive neutral strategy. You make the most amount of money if you pin the stock right around the short strike. So let's look at the payoff diagram for this Iron Butterfly. Again, like I said, if you are selling this, you're essentially doing this trade as two combined spreads. You can do it all in one order. It's a four-legged position, but essentially you want to think about it as a bull put spread, which is this is the put spread side of the position where you'd be selling the 100 strike put, buying the 90 strike put. And then what you're going to do on the other side is you're going to do the call spread side, which is going to be this side of the Iron Butterfly, and you're selling the 100 strike call and then buying the 110 strike call. But notice what you're doing here is that it creates that peak or that top, that apex, whatever you want to call it up here, right around where you're selling both the short put leg and the short call leg. That's what gives this the very distinct look of an Iron Butterfly. Now, the difference mainly between the Iron Butterfly and the Iron Condor, again, is if you look at the payoff diagram for an Iron Condor doesn't have the same short strikes. So you have in an Iron Condor, like we've shown in other videos, you have these short strikes that are further apart, sometimes very wide, and it creates a much wider payoff range, a range to capture the max profit in, but the max profit is limited. So you have a smaller max profit usually with an Iron Condor, but potentially a little bit wider range to catch the position in. Versus if you go back to an Iron Butterfly will have a higher theoretical max profit and a little bit more of a narrow range from which to catch the position in. So let's talk about profit zones and risks for Iron Butterflies. So the way that I always think about it is like this. That's why I created this, because in my mind, visually, I just think about payoff diagrams like this, because I don't think about them on a different tilted scale. I know it's usually taught like this. This is how we teach it. This is how everyone thinks about a payoff diagram. But the reality is that the payoff diagram when you start trading looks like this, where the stock is going to move up or down on the chart. So this is how I think about it, which in Iron Butterfly, let's just assume the stock is trading right around here, which could be about $100 a share in our example. And so when you're selling an Iron Butterfly, you're selling the at the money strike, which is the $100 put in the $100 call, and then you're buying the legs further out, which in our example was buying the legs, say on the put side at 90 and on the call side at 110. So you're selling the 100 strike put, buying the 90 strike put, you're selling the 100 strike call, buying the 110 strike call. Again, you're doubling up on that 100 strike. That creates the peak. And I created this chart to be a little bit more different with the different shading, because basically at this point, if the stock were to land exactly at 100 at expiration, like literally pinned it at 100 at expiration, you'd be exactly at the money, and that would be your max profit potential. Again, if you go back to the chart here, the only time that you make max profit on an Iron Butterfly is if you pin the stock. That's what they say. They say pinning the stock right at $100. So if you can pin it right at $100, which is going to be impossible to actually do, but if you could theoretically, then you get your maximum profit potential. So that probability is probably insanely less than 1, right? And we actually show that in Option Alpha 2, which I'll show you here in a minute. Outside of that, you have your partial profits. Now, this is where most iron butterflies are going to live, is in these partial profit, partial loss, or max loss zones. They almost never live in this max profit, but again, it's just showing you there like what you're kind of targeting. That's why I said it's a really aggressive neutral strategy, because what you're doing here is you're hoping that it pins right at this range or somewhere very, very close to it. Now, outside of that, again, you have your partial profits down to your break-even points and up to your break-even points. In our example here, this is 105 and 95. So if the stock lands anywhere inside this range, we get some partial profits here. Again, if I go back to our payoff diagram, this would be basically between here, 95 and 105. This is going to be our range where we make money on the position. There's no defined amount that we can make because it's not like an iron condor, which we know exactly how much we can make inside that zone. It's definitely going to be a partial profit zone for us where the stock kind of lands somewhere in between here. So again, this is different than an iron condor, where an iron condor, if you knew exactly that the stock would land in between 95 and 105, you know exactly how much you're going to make. You're going to make full profit on this one. This one's just a little bit different. It's just a different flavor of doing it, but you're going to have partial profits basically the whole way. Now, outside of that zone, once you get below your break even and above your break even, you're going to have your partial loss zone. So now you have a little bit wider partial loss zone with an iron butterfly because you still have that pyramid shape that's kind of trending down to the point at which you bought your long wing protection. These are the long wings that we bought as part of our position. So this is what's going to cap our loss. So these are our max loss territories. If we get down here, we know the position's now in the money on either side and we're at maximum loss territory. So we have kind of these partial profits. They start to transition through the break-even point into partial losses on either end. And then at some point you get down to your long strikes, that's where your losses are capped. So again, if you have our payoff diagram here, you have your maximum profit, you have your partial profit zone to your break even. Then after that, you have your partial losses. We don't know exactly what that loss would be, but it's starting to trend towards that maximum loss. And then once you get down here towards your long legs, this is where everything flatlines essentially and your risks are capped. Now, this is the good part about trading iron butterflies, is that you still can have defined profit, defined risk. You can still make all your calculations you would normally do, your EV, your alpha calculations. You can still do all that, and we take care of that for you in Option Alpha through the trade ideas. But you can see that those are those partial profit, partial loss zones. They're just much wider in an iron butterfly. That's just the nature of what they are. Now, again, if you compare this to an iron condor, because most people will compare these back and forth, you can see we drew this one a little bit wider. It's not always this wide when you actually do it in practice. It's kind of really just drawn more so you can see the payoff diagram here. But if you look at it the same way that you would look at the chart that we were just looking at, you'd have for an iron condor, again, this is for an iron condor, so I'll just notate this up here in the top. This is for an iron condor. You have this maximum profit zone, which is much bigger. You have a small zone here of partial profits, partial losses around the break even, and then you have your max loss zones outside of here. So it's a little bit different. Again, when you have an iron butterfly, those zones are just a little bit more exaggerated because of the slope that you have for that payoff diagram. All right, so let's talk about finding trades. Finding trades for iron butterflies, typically very hard if you just start to pick and choose randomly. But if you use trade ideas, of course, you can find trades a little bit easier. Let me show you how to do that. So if you're inside of trade ideas, which again is going to be updating all throughout the day, every single minute, what you can do is you can just automatically select credit. And then we're going to go over here to neutral strategies. So this will give us iron butterflies and iron condors. Notice that when I do neutral strategies, it shows both iron butterflies and iron condors because they're both neutral strategies. But what I would do if you're looking for iron butterflies in particular is I would go and, of course, select ETFs or watch list or whatever symbols you want. So let's just select, just so we can look at the same set of data, let's select XSP just as a single ticker symbol so we can just get the same kind of metrics here. And then what I would do is I would do something probability of profit at least greater than 50% as like a low level filter here. And what you can actually do just to find specifically iron butterflies versus iron condors, if you don't want to look through them in the list, is just sort by probability of max profit. And you're going to want to sort for the lowest probability of max profit, which is going to be less than 1%. Now remember, we're doing this specifically because the probability of max profit essentially means the probability of pinning the stock exactly at the short strike. that's always going to be less than 1%. So we calculate that here for you. You can see it's less than 1%, but that means that these are going to be your iron butterfly positions because they have a very, very low likelihood of hitting that max profit. But once you do that, then you can start to look through the list here and see if there's any positions that you find that are appropriate or things that you want to trade. If you click on any of the positions here, you can see that that position actually pops up and you get all the relevant information and criteria. So you can see that payoff diagram is that same kind of payoff diagram that we went through in the slides earlier where it's got that peak. And here, what you can see is that the peak for this iron butterfly is at 639. That's our short strikes. Notice that those short strikes are exactly the same. So that would create that iron butterfly position for you. That is where your strategy peaks at 639. Those are those short strikes. So you'd make the most amount of money at 639. If you could get it to 639, you'd make 338, which is the max profit. Again, the likelihood of making max profit, less than 1%, because you're not going to pin it there. It almost never pins exactly at that price at expiration. So what you really basically have is you have more of a partial profit, partial loss zone. But in this case, again, what we're doing here is we're buying the 634 legs, buying the 644 calls on either side. This is a pretty balanced position, pretty balanced iron butterfly position. You can still get your alpha, you can still get your EV. Probability of profit generally is 66%. So that's a pretty good trade overall. Now, if you wanted to adjust these strikes, you can adjust these in here, but if you go outside of these same short strikes, like if I go up here, notice our system will automatically detect that you're now trying to create an iron condor position. So you can actually change it really quick, and now you can see that iron condor payoff diagram start to take shape. This is more of an iron condor type setup. You can see how that's kind of shifting and changing where you have your max profit zone. So it's, again, very similar to an iron butterfly. It's just those inside short strikes are not the same. If we go back to those same short strikes, then our system will detect that you want to go back to an iron butterfly, change it back over so you have your right payoff diagram, and then you can see you can adjust it. Now, the other thing you can do with iron butterflies is you can not only tilt the iron butterfly a little bit higher or lower based on if you think the stock might trend higher or trend a little bit lower. It doesn't always have to be placed right at the money. So you can actually adjust this position higher. So we'll just adjust these strikes up here to 42, for example. Let's adjust these strikes up a couple as well and get that balanced payoff diagram. So now you can see we just shifted the entire strategy up a little bit. So we have now our short strikes at 642. The stock is trading at 639. So now what we're doing is we're hoping maybe the stock kind of trends a little bit higher and kind of lands somewhere in this zone. So this would be kind of like a tilted or a shifted or, you know, kind of a just a little bit of a movement higher or lower. You can do this both ways for iron butterflies. And that's what people will typically do. So you don't always have to enter them at the money. You can enter them a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You can kind of see if the stock might trend into that kind of range. I don't necessarily do this for mine, just so you know, because I'm not trying to guess where the market's going to go. So I'm going to trade more based on the numbers and the stats. But if you did want to do this, you can, of course, make that change right in here. Now, the other thing you can do with your iron condors or your iron butterflies is you can create unbalanced positions. Sometimes you'll actually see this in trade ideas where trade ideas will show a position or you'll get into a position with unbalanced sets of spreads. And what this means is that one side is a little bit wider than the other side. It doesn't always have to be exactly the same, but in this case, you can see our short put side here is about $5 wide, and then our short call side here is about $10 wide. This creates what's called an unbalanced or tilted or skewed iron butterfly payoff diagram, where you're actually taking more risk on one side of the position. So this is a pretty unique one that you could do where you actually have the risk of losing $116 on the lower side here, and then on the top side, your risk is $615. It still calculates all the different expected values and everything in here for you, so you know, but this would be a case where you think there's less risk that the stock continues to go higher, more risk that the stock actually reverses, but you still want to play it so that you potentially can make some money if it just stays the same or trades in this range. So people can do that often. Again, sometimes you will see this just naturally come up in trade ideas. You can, of course, filter for some of these here using the spread amount here for the minimum or maximum spreads. But if you don't want that, you can just let it bring up all these positions. And sometimes you will get some kind of uniquely skewed or positions that have a little bit of tilt to them, which you might find pretty interesting. So, all right, so let's go ahead and try to find a trade that we can get into right now. So just going to hit the refresh real quick. And this is going to pull up the latest stats for these positions. I do like trading XSP and SPX for iron butterflies, only because I know one leg is going to land in the money. And so because these are cash settled, I don't have to worry about assignment for those. So if I actually just pull up this top trade here, the one that's listed right at the top, this one actually doesn't look like too bad of a trade. It's risking about, I think this is the same one that we kind of were looking at earlier, but it's just still has been at the top. So this one looks pretty good. It's the 639, which is a little bit under where the stock is trading. You could potentially make 333, which is going to be less than 1%. That's just kind of the max. So we know it's going to be less than that. But the expected value of this trade is still positive $81. It's got positive alpha, great risk to reward. And in this case, we're risking about $165. So very small position that you could get into. I would ideally maybe even close this one early if I could get a profit on this thing, maybe 40 or 50%. You could take this thing off early. You're never going to get that whole $335 profit, but you could shoot for something a little bit more aggressive if you wanted to and hold the position longer. So if I want to get in this position, I would just set my final pricing here. So we'll do 333. We'll do 333, which is about a penny under mid price here. We'll use normal smart pricing, so it tries multiple prices if we can. We're going to select the bot that we want to put this one into. I'll put it into my live bot, which is just my trade idea bot. The trade idea bot for me is just a housing place that's connected to my brokerage account. In this case, it's connected to my TradeStation account, and it can help manage all of my exit options. And then what I'll do here is I'll do my classic management, which is going to be 50% profit or 2 hours before expiration. That's the classic default that I have. I'm going to reset that for expiration because this is XSP, and I'm just going to use 50% profit taking for this one. So what that'll do is if we do have a 50% profit, it's going to take it. And if not, it'll let it run until expiration. Since this is XSP, it is going to be cash settled, so I don't have to worry about managing any sort of assignment. I'm not going to get assigned XSP stock because there is no XSP stock. It's just cash settled. So I'm going to go here and simply place the trade. And you can see here that this order is working. So it is trying for 334 right now. We said that the final price it can try is 333. That's our lowest price that we're willing to go down to. But because the market's kind of moving around, it's going to try at that higher price first, see if we can't get a fill. It did not get a fill in this case. And so now it's going to sit at 333. Now you can, by the way, you can let this sit and time out and then try it again. Or in this case, if you wanted to, you can actually pause this current price for 15 minutes. I will do this often during the day if I'm getting into a position, a one-off position like this, where I'm finding a trade, getting into it. I'll just let the position pause at that price for 15 minutes. If it cancels, I'll come back in and try a new price because obviously that one didn't fill. So we'll come back to this one here in a little bit and see if this position actually filled. Now let's talk through a little bit of automation for iron butterflies. Iron butterflies are exactly the same as any other strategy inside of Option Alpha. Of course, you can automate the entire process of finding iron butterfly positions and managing those positions inside of your bots and automations. One of the easiest ways actually to find iron butterfly positions and test and automate them is through the backtester. So if you go to the backtester, you can test your strategies. Notice I test a lot of strategies, but if you have a strategy that you want to test that's an iron butterfly, you can actually test that strategy right inside the backtester. So in this case, I tested a 0 DTE strategy on SPX where I was selling an iron butterfly. Notice that I was matching the short strikes up where I was doing the exact same short strike for these positions. And then I was testing some different allocations, some different position sizing and entry triggers, and ultimately found a strategy that ended up being a good strategy or okay strategy if you wanted to say that. And so from here, what you could do is you could simply just create a bot from this backtest. Now this is the easiest way. So I can say iron butterfly 0 DTE strategy, and you would connect it to your live account like TradeStation, give it some capital. You would tell it when to scan for the position, which I won't go through in here. I've gone through this in other videos. And then you just simply create the bot. Now, when you go in here, the bot is created for you based on your backtest. So it's created from the testing environment that you put it through. And then inside of your automation here, it's going to open a position that is an iron butterfly type. And you can see that's the type of position we want to open. Again, you can do this inside of any automation. You can just simply add a position here. This one was created automatically for you from the backtest, but it's basically using the exact same parameters from your backtest here. If you wanted to create it fresh or from scratch, you would just simply go anywhere inside of your automation, click on the plus to add an action step. And then if you went to open position, you could open an iron butterfly here. You would just go down to short positions, select iron butterfly, and then you would tell the bot exactly the type of iron butterfly position you want to open. Now, if you use the regular open position action, which is what I'm showing here, you basically are telling the bot what you want to do. You know exactly what strikes you want to select, exactly what expiration, exactly how you want the position built out. If you don't know exactly what type of position you want, you can open what's called a trade idea action. And what that's going to do is it's going to find an iron butterfly position that matches your criteria that you're looking for. So something like the probability of max profit or the probability of profit or the maximum risk. Doesn't mean it's going to always find it, because if you're looking for something that doesn't exist, it's not going to find it. But if you open a trade idea action for an iron butterfly, you can select the symbol, you can choose the expiration or leave it as optional. And then what you can do inside of position and entry criteria is you can go down here and tell it to find a position that meets your criteria. So it could be something like expires before the next FOMC meeting, the risk to reward is greater than 100%, the expected value per contract is greater than 5, the probability of profit is greater than 55%, and the max loss per contract is less than $500, right? So now you're doing a different experience here, which is you're telling the bot and the automation to go and look for a potential trade that meets your criteria, and you're not telling it exactly which one to enter because you're kind of open to entering different strikes or potentially different expirations. So there's a couple ways you can do it. Of course, this is the easiest way to do it is through the use of the automatically create a bot or generate a bot from the backtest. That's what I do for a lot of those, but you do have the ability to create your own automations and run your own automations to find iron condor positions. All right, so jumping back over here to check on our position, it's still working at 333. Right now, mid price is around 331 here. So if you want to, you could just leave it here at 333, continue to work the position. I'm actually going to just cancel and retry the order. So I'm going to click that, cancel and retry. You can see mid price is actually back up to around 333. I'm just going to inch it down just a little bit here. We'll do 331. It's kind of moving around. It'll still try for higher pricing if there's higher pricing available. So again, it's now retrying it at 333. Mid price is around 332, 333 right now. So maybe it actually gets filled here. And then it will start to progressively move down and try lower prices. I'm still okay with this position. I can still afford to have a penny or two of slippage on it. It's still a good trade. I still like it. Stat wise and number wise, it's just a good position to get into. It can add to it. I'm not beholden to it. I'm not emotionally tied to it. It doesn't really matter. So you can see here that 333 tried, then it tried 332. I would assume it's going to fill probably at 331, somewhere in here. That's just like a penny below where the market is trading right now. So I'm going to leave this one on here and we can come back here and check on this position in a couple minutes. Okay, actually, so it didn't take too long. It did actually fill at 331 here. So we are into the trade at 331. Again, once you get into the position on Option Alpha, you'll see all of your stats, your risk reward, your out of the money, alpha, expected value, probability profit, everything. And in this case, you can see I've got my exit options, which are currently working right now. So I have my 50% profit taking, I've got my bid-ask spread guard in place, which seems to be working right now. And it's going to be tracking the high of the position to see if I can take profits. I don't have any other exit options on this one. So for this one, it's just simply going to let it run to expiration if it doesn't exit it before for a profit taking level. So still a good position. I still like it. It's a small trade. I'm only risking $169 on it, potentially to make $100, $120 maybe or so if I take profits early. and that's a good trade for me. So, all right, I hope this video really helped out with understanding what iron butterflies are, how to set them up, what their profit zones and risk zones are, how to find trades, how to automate trades, and I hope that live trade example helped you get started with potentially finding your own iron butterfly strategy. As always, we'll put a bunch of links below this video description so you can check it out for yourself, run your back tests, find trade ideas for iron butterflies. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, share it with your friends, help spread the word about what we're trying to do here at Option Alpha. And until next time, happy trading.